let's continue with the text. What page were we on? 35? Is it 35? 34? 36? Ooh, which one's it? Doubting consciousness, that's right. Sorry. Alright, so what are the categories we got to know so far? We got to know a mind from the point of view of its main object of apprehension as it's called, or object of engagement. If it doesn't exist, and the mind doesn't take it as an object intentionally, it's a wrong consciousness. If it takes it, if its object exists, it's a correct consciousness. If it's object of apprehension. So your criterion is the object of apprehension. Then when we look at the appearing object, if that is not there, for instance, inherent existence doesn't exist, but it's a phenomenon that still appears to be inherently existent, then we say it's a mistaken mind versus a non-mistaken mind. Okay? And so we distinguish, therefore, between a correct mind and a mistaken mind. So a correct mind can still be mistaken. In English, that sounds contradictory. We wouldn't say that. This person is correct, but they're mistaken. However, since the criterion here for being mistaken and for being correct does not concern the same object, therefore it's okay to distinguish that way. In Tibetan they do it. In Tibetan it may sound initially just as weird, but that's the way to distinguish. And then on top of that, we have awarenesses that know their objects, that incontrovertibly know their objects, and we have awarenesses that don't. Of course, you can't have a wrong consciousness that is a valid cognizer, because you cannot know something that doesn't exist. So that's important. Like, horns of the rabbit cannot be known. The appearance of the horns of the rabbit can be known. Of course, the appearance can be known. But that would not be the main object of the mind perceiving the horns of the rabbit. Therefore, a mind that perceives the horns of a rabbit, as an example, is a wrong consciousness. It's a mistaken consciousness too, because the horns appear and they don't exist. Okay. So, therefore, wrong, correct, mistaken, non-mistaken, valid, non-valid. That already covers a large, a large area of mind. So basically, all minds can be divided in those two. And then you have, of course, sense consciousnesses versus mental consciousnesses, which I'm pretty sure is quite clear now, all of you. So, sense consciousness versus mental consciousness. And then when it comes to mental consciousness, you have those that are conceptual and those that are non-conceptual. Of course, non-conceptual minds also include all sense consciousnesses. They're all non-conceptual. So any sense consciousness is a non-conceptual mind. And then any mental consciousness that is not a direct perceiver is conceptual. All right. Okay. So, or any mental consciousness that is, well, the question is, can you have a wrong mental consciousness that is not conceptual?
No.
Well, what about the direct perceiver that's a dream? You can have a dream consciousness that is a correct consciousness, and you can have a dream consciousness that is a wrong consciousness. If in the dream, the dream elephant appears, or you apprehend that dream elephant to be a real elephant, it's a wrong consciousness. If you just perceive a dream elephant, and even better, you know it's a dream elephant, like during lucid dreaming, it's not a wrong consciousness. Does that make sense? So, the dream elephant exists. Does the dream elephant exist? Yes, it's an appearance of it's an appearance of an elephant in a dream. That exists. But the dream elephant is not a real elephant. The dream elephant is not an elephant. It's just an appearance in a dream. It's not a real elephant. So therefore, you wouldn't say that. You would say it's a wrong consciousness to apprehend a dream elephant to be an actual elephant. So in our dreams, mostly in our dreams, we're not aware that we're dreaming. We are scared, right? We are scared of the elephant, etc. We hold it to be really an elephant. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Whereas when you engage in lucid dreaming, at that time, at the time of lucid dreaming, you know it's not an elephant, it's just a dream. Okay? So if you have such a dream, a lucid dream, where you know that you're dreaming, plus it's a direct perceiver, you have a non-conceptual mind. It's a correct mind. Yeah, it's a correct mind that is non-conceptual, but a direct perceiver. No, in the other way around. If you have a direct perceiver that is a dream consciousness, a direct perceiver that is a dream consciousness, but you think it is a real elephant in the case of dreaming of an elephant, then it's a wrong mental consciousness that is a non-conceptual mind. It's not a direct perceiver, sorry. By definition, if its object doesn't exist, it cannot be a direct perceiver. A direct perceiver is a mind that is not conceptual and its object exists. Okay? So a direct perceiver is a mind, doesn't have to realize its object. A direct perceiver doesn't have to realize its object, but it's a mind that is non-conceptual and its object exists. So you can have non-conceptual minds that are wrong consciousnesses. You can have non-conceptual sense consciousnesses, of course, sense consciousnesses that are wrong consciousnesses. They are non-conceptual, they are wrong, perceiving the horns of a rabbit, right? Any sense consciousness, either it's a wrong consciousness or a correct consciousness. If it is a correct consciousness, it's called a direct perceiver. If it's a wrong consciousness, it's just a non-conceptual wrong consciousness. Okay? So you just need to remember a few kind of characteristics. Direct perceiver is non-conceptual and correct. Direct perceiver is non-conceptual and correct. Quite simple. A valid cognizer is either conceptual or non-conceptual. It is correct and it realizes its object. Okay?
Say that one again, please.
Which one was that? The last one. Oh, a valid cognizer. A valid cognizer can be either conceptual or non-conceptual. However, its object always exists. As an object always has to exist. It always has to be a correct mind, and the mind must realize its main object. The mind realizes its main object. Then it can be called a valid cognizer. A correct consciousness can be conceptual or non-conceptual. The main criterion for it is to see whether its object exists or not. All right. So you see, we have these general categories, but then during a debate, you start taking examples and you ask, which of those categories does it belong to? So it's one mind, but it may belong in the category of correct consciousness, of conceptual consciousness, and of valid cognizer. And then you also ask, what are the possibilities? How do those two relate? For instance, a conceptual consciousness versus a correct consciousness. Is whatever is a correct consciousness a conceptual consciousness? Is whatever is a correct consciousness a conceptual consciousness? No. Is whatever is a conceptual consciousness a correct consciousness? No. Yeah. Is there something that's both a correct consciousness and a conceptual consciousness? Yes. Is there something that is neither? Yes. So there are four possibilities between those two. So we check basically how are they related. This is very popular in Buddhist debate. Not only do you understand the definition of something, do you understand how large the category is. You need to comprehend, how large is the category? How many awarenesses fit into that category? And which awarenesses do not fit? It sounds a little difficult, but you can all do that. It's so easy. You do this with your everyday kind of stuff, right? You know a bicycle does not belong into the category of cars. But blue cars belong into that category. We can all do that. We've all learned that. Maybe not with that system that I just explained. But basically we get that. And in Buddhism you have that too, but in a very systematic kind of way. Of course, the interdependence of phenomena is very important. And therefore you check right from the beginning. Is there something that is both a mind and a conceptual mind? Right? What is the relationship between the two? So in this first case we said, when I said correct mind and conceptual mind, whatever is one is not the other, whatever is the other is not one. But with conceptual consciousness and mind, whatever is a conceptual consciousness must be a mind. Whatever is a mind is not necessarily a conceptual consciousness. It's a different relationship. I can say consciousness and brain. Whatever is a consciousness is not a brain. Whatever is a brain is not a consciousness. There's nothing that is both. So they're contradictory. And then I use consciousness and mind. They are synonymous. So phenomena have those four relationships. There's no other way. Either they're synonymous, just different names with the same thing, or they're contradictory. There's nothing which is both. Or they have a common locus. There's something which is both. But in that case, there's only two ways in which they can relate. Either whatever is the one is necessarily the other, but whatever is the other is not necessarily the one. Or there is something that is both, but whatever is the one is not necessarily the other, whatever is the other is not necessarily the one. There's no other way they can relate. No other way. You can try, you won't find anything. So either synonymous, contradictory, or there is something that is both, those two, but it goes only one way, as in like whatever is one is necessarily the other, but whatever is the other is not the one. Or in both ways, whatever is the one is not the other, whatever is the other is not the one, but there's something that is both. Right? I mean, we've used the example, blue and a table. Whatever is blue is not a table. Blue and table have a common locus. There is something that is both a table and it's blue.
Blue table.
Right, blue table. Right? But whatever is blue is not necessarily a table. Whatever is a table is not necessarily blue. Very simple. But there's something that's both. But then if you take furniture and table, there's something that is both. A table itself. But whatever is a table is a piece of furniture. Whatever is a piece of furniture is not a table. Right? There's no other possibilities. So you have two phenomena that have a common locus, then it's one of those two. That's basic Buddhist logic. Okay? So you then check. Take two phenomena, take two awarenesses and check. Are they synonymous? Is there anything that is both? For instance, a wrong consciousness and a correct consciousness. So something that is both? No. There are awarenesses that are contradictory. Is there something that has a mistaken mind and a wrong consciousness? A mistaken mind and a correct consciousness? Yes, there is, absolutely. Okay, and then you check. Since there's something that's both, which way? Is whatever is mistaken necessarily a correct mind? Is whatever is a correct mind necessarily a mistaken mind? Okay? Right? Both ways. Okay? In that way. So we check out relationships. That's part of our study. That's the beginning part. Right? And then, it sounds complicated, but trust me, you do that for 2 weeks, every day, 4 hours, and it's second nature. Really, it gets so easy. It gets really... Sometimes there's some ideas, one with itself and one with, like these really difficult, complicated ones. But they're just complicated because we don't think so much about them. Once you kind of get what they refer to, then it's pretty easy. It's really easy. So basically when you do what I just described, check out this relationship. It's really funny. It becomes second nature. I do this all the time. All the time, even out of the Buddhist context. Right away I check their relationships. I'm so trained in doing this. Do this with phenomena when I get to know it. What kind of phenomenon is it? And right away I know automatically, there's something that's both. But whatever's the one is necessarily the other, whatever's the other is not necessarily the one. 3 possibilities. I know automatically. So you're so trained in that way, and it really helps you to connect things and make sense of them. And I find that's one of the biggest part of the study. It's like sometimes they say when you finish your studies, only then you finally become a Geshe, even though you're already a Geshe, but you finally become one. In the sense that during your study, you take pieces of a puzzle, you take these puzzles and you understand these puzzle pieces, but you don't really know how they connect together, only very roughly. And then you start seeing the whole picture. You've got distance to it, and you have all the knowledge of all the different categories, and now you see how it fits together. That's very rewarding, but it comes after. It comes after 17, 18 years of study, right? But it doesn't matter. I didn't expect that. It just happened. I was like, wow, that's amazing. It just happens. Anyway, so that's why I also teach a little bit in that way. I try to focus on, of course, one topic, but bring in other ideas that you've heard about, and I give you a sense of how they fit in, how they fit into this topic, because everything you learned fits into this topic. There's no single topic in Buddhism that does not in some way connect to this. And you can easily draw that connection. You can easily make that connection. Right? Emptiness, of course, belongs in here big time. Not realizing emptiness is the reason why we are mistaken. Right? Why we have wrong consciousnesses in the first place. Why we have afflictive emotions in the first place. Then that they are non-mistaken and correct consciousnesses, both non-mistaken. That's because people can realize emptiness. It's possible to realize it. Right? That you can have a direct mind that is a mental consciousness. Yes, through meditation you can develop that. Okay? So there's really nothing. There's no topic in Buddhism that does not relate to this. And you need to see that. And you don't need to necessarily go through 17 years. You can see that in different ways too. Does that make sense? Great. All right. Now, going back to this, the point here of the doubting consciousness. So, just to have this brief overview, the relationship between those different minds. Now we're talking about non-valid cognizers, which doesn't mean that they're not valid in the sense that they're wrong. That's important. Don't get hung up on the words. That's also one aspect we are conditioned to. Don't get hung up on the words. The classic example, they use the word for lotus is lake-born. Tokye in Tibetan. So lake-born. Not every lotus is lake-born. The one in your flower pot was not born from a lake. Right? I mean, we have lots of words in English that we never think about them. Right? Give me an example of a word that is like, it really doesn't mean. Usually it's non-native English speakers who can give me a word. Because like you hear this word and you go, what? Why do you call that? It doesn't have those two syllables in any way.
Raining cats and dogs.
Pardon?
Raining cats and dogs.
Raining cats and dogs, for example. Or like words, just words itself. So that's an expression, raining cats and dogs. But like words. Like two words and it's like, why? We call it that, but we never really think about. Right? It's not like because I remember like some Indian once said to another person I was walking with, like, you're so handsome, hand and some. And I was like, what? And I was like, oh, hand and some. I don't know why handsome means, it's not hand and some really. But he just took apart like you're hand and some. Took it apart. So this is not a good example. Like you don't get hung up on like what hand and some. But there are certain words, and I don't remember one now. I remember in the past there were words which seem to mean something specific. If you take it literally, that's what it seems to mean, but it means actually something different. Or it can mean in certain circumstances, it can mean something different. But since we totally know the meaning of it, we never doubt it. I had so many examples, but I forgot them now. Can you think of anything?
I can't. Try.
Butterfly. Okay, that's nice. Butterfly, that's good.
Yeah.
A butterfly. What about the butter and the fly, right? I mean, it's not like, it's kind of a buttery kind of fly or something. So that would possibly work. I mean, those are words where there's really no butter involved. But you have also words where sometimes it can refer to that, but it doesn't have to. Like the word lake-born. You can have lotuses that, of course, arise, that grow from lakes, or lake-grown, if you like. The word geba in Tibetan can mean grown, and it can mean arise or born. But so it can be, you can have a lotus that is literally lake-born, but it doesn't have to be. Does that make sense?
Like a watchman?
A watchman, yeah, a watchman who falls asleep. No. Yeah, but like a watchman is not necessarily watching. So, or like when they do other things, they will still be called a watchman, but they're not doing it in that moment. Anyway, so when you learn philosophy, people, when they don't, it's a natural tendency we have. We understand the word, but since we don't understand the meaning, we know the syllables and stuff, we then hold onto the word as being the meaning. So non-valid cognizers is a good example. People feel like, it's not valid, it must be wrong. But that's not the case. Non-valid here doesn't mean wrong. It just means doesn't realize its object. It can be wrong, doesn't have to be wrong. Pardon?
Incontrovertible.
Yes, being incontrovertible or not. That's the kind of criterion. It's not about its object existing or not. All right. Doubting consciousnesses. Anyway, so doubting consciousnesses, they don't realize their object. You can't realize and know something if you're not decisive about the object, like if you waver about it. And of course you can have two categories. You can have a correct doubt and a non-correct doubt. Like when you turn away from the fact, then it's incorrect. When you turn towards the fact, it's correct. And when it's undecided, it's still non-correct. Right? So we distinguish. But we also talk about a good kind of doubt and a bad kind of doubt. So afflictive or non-afflictive. One that can become an obstacle to our practice, and one that is actually assisting our practice. Okay? So afflictive doubt is a wavering conceptual consciousness that arises in dependence on any of what is called the three poisons: ignorance, anger, and attachment. Those are the main afflictive emotions. Or in dependence on an unsteady awareness that does not examine closely. It disturbs our mind and may result in staying trapped in a wavering state. So it's a type of doubt where you just keep doubting. You never come to some kind of conclusion. Because of ignorance, it's like, it's probably not, it's maybe not. You can never make up your mind, basically. Furthermore, deluded doubt interferes with our worldly activities by rendering us incapable of making decisions. Right? Have you ever met people like they just can't make a decision? I have a little nephew. For him to decide between chocolate and vanilla ice cream, well, it's a drama. It turns into a drama. Right? He's so afraid of making the wrong decision. He's really young. I hope he grows out of it. But wow, about any decision, he stays with his grandma or not. Wow, he goes for hours and then he's crying because he can't make a decision because he's so scared he makes the wrong decision. Right? That's the kind of deluded doubt. Afflicted doubt. Okay. From the point of view of Dharma practice, so it's incapable for us to make decisions because we never really know what's the best solution. So it's difficult for us to stay with a particular course of action. Makes total sense. From the point of view of Dharma practice, it can shake our faith in the Dharma, discourage us from studying, and prevent us from engaging in effective meditation. At least have doubt tending towards one direction and make some kind of decision, right? Like, should I study the Dharma? Should I not? Should I be kind? Should I not? It's like, right? Should I just not be selfish? Because everyone thinks of themselves and I'm the only one thinking of myself, so we're kind of, I don't know, whatever the reasons are. In fact, it's one of the most common causes of abandoning Buddhist practice. Having doubts about it, it's like, well, I'm not sure. Because you're totally convinced. Why would you give it up? If you're totally convinced this brings me lasting happiness and everything else is secondary to it, of course we work towards our own happiness. But one of the main reasons we give up our practice is like, well, maybe not, right? Maybe it's all no, right? Okay. Non-afflictive doubt, on the other hand, is very good. Does not disturb our mind. It is two-pointed, yes, and undecided about its object of engagement, but leads to the wish to clear our doubts and come to a correct understanding. So, actually, when we first come to Buddhism, of course, we're full of doubts. There'll be something wrong. I mean, not wrong necessarily, but unless you have really strong imprints and you go, oh, yeah, all makes sense. But most people are not like that. They may understand a few parts and they're free from doubt with regard to certain ideas, but there's still certain ideas are like, past and future lives, for instance, or karma, depending on which cultural background you have. You may find that difficult. Selflessness, of course, still have doubts about the mind and the brain. So there are always some doubts left, but those are considered to be good doubts. They encourage us to find out. Okay? So again, with the afflictive doubt, it's just an extreme case where you can't let go of the doubt. Like I said, every negative emotion, every afflictive emotion, if you like, or afflictive type of mind. Actually, not every afflictive. No, this is a little confusing. Because we talk about afflictive emotion, that's actually not a good word. It's not a good word. Disruptive emotion is not a good word. Negative emotions is not a good word. Because there's some afflictive states of mind that are not emotions. For instance, the ignorance that misperceives reality, that is actually not an emotion. The way we've, of course, at least talked about emotions, such as wishing for something, like anger, like attachment, like jealousy, they all wish for something. And then you have rational types of mind that are, well, in this case, irrational, wrong perceptions of reality. So doubt is one of them. Kind of like not wishing for anything. There's no wish to harm the other person, wish to not be separated from the other person, as in the case of anger and attachment, but rather being undecisive about the object and continuing on, never coming to some kind of conclusion. It's not just being undecisive, but not being able to let go of that undecisiveness. So it's kind of induced by attachment in that case. Or maybe aversion. It could also be aversion. Or just not really getting it, like constant misapprehension. So that is an extreme form of doubt. There's the counterpart that is healthy, that is non-afflictive doubt. And then there's the extreme version. So like I said, our whole lives are about extremes. And by finding balances between this extreme and that extreme. And only a Buddha has found the exact middle ground. Until we become a Buddha, we will always, to one degree or another, to certain degrees, we would always be extreme. And it's very interesting. If you look at this idea of extreme, non-extreme, well, even when we talk about mentally sick people or people who have mental problems, it's only because their mental states, in certain circumstances, not every type of awareness they have is affected by the mental disease, but certain ones are. And since the average refers to a certain degree of extremes, since that goes beyond that, we label mental disease, right? I was just talking with Maya about this when I arrived here, how when you study, well, she studied psychology, I didn't, but I learned a little bit on my own about it. And every time I read about a certain disease, I recognize myself. I'm like, well, a little bit I have of that. Right? Whatever I read up on, it's like so interesting. And of course, I never understand. It's always for dummies and stuff. But what I read, like the little bit, I always find myself in them. And I even meet people who I can obviously recognize there's something wrong with them, but I get it. Because I recognize themselves. A tendency that they may have, I have it too. Maybe just not to such an extreme degree. And as I said, yes, Tim, as I said before, only the Buddha really doesn't have it. So actually, in comparison to the Buddha, we all have mental diseases. We've all fallen into one extreme or another. Okay? And they're just different degrees of that. And suddenly, if everyone had ADHD, and we have a form of ADHD in the 21st century, then that wouldn't be considered to be abnormal anymore. So it's only in comparison to everything else that we say this is a disease. But actually, we all have a certain type of disease. Tim?
Sorry, it's just the phrase disturbing the mind, a non-afflicted doubt, not disturbing the mind. And I'm struggling with understanding why, if doubts that are afflictive, and that are three poisons, if they disturb the mind, how does doubt that's effectively a good doubt, in what sense does that not disturb the mind? What does disturbing the mind mean?
What does disturbing the mind mean? Okay, all right, good point. So, how do we define an afflictive emotion?
That which disturbs the mind.
That which disturbs the mind. What does that mean, though?
Yeah.
What does it mean? What does it mean to disturb the mind? What does it mean?
Suffering.
No, not suffering.
Get away from the nature of the mind.
No.
Takes away your equanimity.
Takes away our equanimity, yes.
Increases illusion.
It disturbs our peace of mind.
So that's suffering.
No, but not every suffering. Like if I say, what does it mean to disturb? And you say suffering, that would imply that every suffering is a delusion because it disturbs the mind. But not every suffering. You see, like it's the other way around. Yes, you're right. When there's an afflictive emotion, there's a certain degree of suffering, but a certain degree of suffering doesn't necessarily mean, right? It basically means like there's a certain state of mind that you have, right? A certain state of peace, a certain state of equanimity, if you like. That doesn't have to be disturbed by suffering. Only when you grow attached and angry about it, right? So you can still suffer and be totally peaceful, okay? Especially physically. But when we say any kind of like, for instance, you're very calm, very much at ease, everything is going well, what happens when there's attachment? Right away, like some kind of disturbance. Anger even more so. Like sometimes with anger, we can feel happy. Right? In that moment, I can just... there's almost a relief. Does that make sense? So I'm not sure with every anger, there's an actual suffering of suffering in that moment. Like when we say suffering, like you really feel miserable. You may feel good. You'll let it out. Okay? It could be like in just ordinary worldly terms, it's not... Or attachment. Attachment seems to bring us happiness. Right? When there's attachment and it's not too strong and you get what you want and you're like, this is like having me... That's why I was late. Tell you the truth.
You don't have to confess.
Maya? It's Maya's fault. I was attachment pure. Like at the nunnery, it's all whole food and heavy and stuff. And then she opened this plate with these cones. So fluffy that you had for breakfast. I ate the whole thing. It took me 5 minutes and I was late. I was like, oh my God, it's 31. It took me 5 minutes to eat the whole cone. It was so delicious. I haven't had anything like that in years. I was tempted to eat the second cone, but that would have been 10 more minutes. Oh, I watched my attachment and I didn't care. Wow, that was a good cone. I won't forget that one. Right?
You're not good at hiding it. You came in and you were still licking your lips.
I still had a piece of peanut butter in my tooth for the first 5 minutes. to get it out. And I was probably still licking my lips because, yes, I forgot to mention the peanut butter. But you see... monks and nuns are just like you guys. So I can control it to some degree. But of course, even controlling can become a problem. That's when you have the eating disorder. Trying too much to. So it's again this extreme, trying to, of course, control it, but not go to an extreme. I mean, I have an opposite eating disorder. I'm more at the obesity spectrum, but like in the other direction, right? No, all I'm trying to say is like the moment attachment arises, I mean, you cannot be calm, you cannot be on time in class. The cone rules. All right, so this is what we mean. Sorry, term for that disruption. But anyway, so it's really like you can be very peaceful. The moment an afflictive emotion arises in your mind, in that moment, your peace of mind is gone. Does that make sense?
But if you've got a doubt that's non-afflictive, it still doesn't help equanimity. You've still got doubt.
No, that's true. But it's not like, you see, the kind of doubt that is induced by attachment, it has that aspect of attachment in there, right? Like, for instance... Let me give you an example of a doubt. If you're very attached to a certain view, there's strong attachment to a certain view, and you learn about an opposite view, that kind of makes sense to you. But due to the attachment, you can't allow your mind to really understand that the second view actually makes sense. So you can't come to a decision because you're so attached to the other view, right? So... Or if you're attached to a person and everyone tells you, let it go, this person beats you up, they're just giving you a lot of pain in your life. But because of the attachment, you always doubt their good advice. And you kind of know with another mind, oh, this is bad for me. But the doubt is always nagging. It's like a nagging doubt. We even use this word, nagging doubt. Versus, inherent existence or not, well, I'm not so sure. Right? That's not nagging. That is very rational. It's based on a rational kind of thinking. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
So would you also say like some doubts tend to bother us and some
Yes,
we are at
exactly.
peace with? Like
Yes.
for example, if I'm doing
exactly.
Dharma practice and I say, okay, I still don't get emptiness
Yeah.
totally, but it's okay.
Yes,
Hopefully
exactly.
One day I will.
Yes, exactly. So Dharma practice, a lot of it is part of finding that balance, of finding your own inner peace. Because we bring all this baggage of expectations. Like with our Dharma practice, if you're an ambitious person, you bring your ambitiousness to the Dharma practice. And that can be a huge obstacle. Or if you're a doubting person who never really comes to a conclusion, you bring that with you. And the challenge then is, of course, to use the Dharma to recognize that and take care of it. All right, sorry. 2 questions, but sorry, I'm not being fair if I take not any further, but let's just wait a little bit with the questions, because otherwise we're again, I'll lose the flow a little bit. Okay. Now, non-afflictive doubt does not disturb the mind. It is two-pointed and undecided about its object of engagement, but leads to the wish to clear our doubts and come to a correct understanding. From the point of view of Dharma practice, this type of doubt may arise in the process of trying to understand a profound and subtle Dharma topic. It can often arouse a strong interest in the Dharma, induce detailed analysis, and lead to a thorough understanding of the topic. I think we've all went through this. When you all did your first course here in Tushita, the fact that you're here right now, you've all had a healthy type of doubt that led you to go further, to read more, to go to the classes, even the first course, to continue the course to the end, because of the healthy type of doubt. That's a very good type of doubt. It's not this nagging one. In fact, Ayadeva says in his 400 verses, okay, here I'm citing a few times I did cite actually, Ayadeva, who's Nagarjuna's disciple, that merely doubting intrinsic existence damages cyclic existence. It's a huge, very important quote. Because so far we've been so stuck in cyclic existence, it is doubtful that we've doubted it, that we've ever doubted samsara. So here's the quote: "Those with little merit do not even doubt this doctrine. Entertaining just a doubt tears to tatters cyclic existence." Okay. Now that's the first type of a non-valid consciousness. That doesn't have to be incorrect. Can be, it doesn't have to be, but nonetheless it doesn't get it, it doesn't realize its object. It cannot be incontrovertible because it's wavering kind of nature. And then the next is a correctly assuming consciousness, or correctly assuming consciousnesses. They're also sometimes called correct belief, because it's saying you're convinced, but correctly convinced. In fact, you can't say, I'm convinced of the existence of horns of rabbits. Well, yes, you can say that in English. Oh, I'm convinced of inherent existence. You actually can say that in English. But here the word conviction means you're convinced of something that does exist. Right? I mean, if you're convinced of something that doesn't exist, that's called wrong consciousness. So actually every wrong consciousness is usually a conviction of something that doesn't exist, right? What else can you be convinced? If you have doubt, then it's a doubting consciousness tending away from the fact, all right? Or it's, so wrong consciousness can only be the two. A wrong consciousness where you're convinced, or where you're doubting. Undecisive, that's it. In both cases, the object doesn't exist. Now, when you correctly assume, and that's important, because it's so important to understand reality, as you know. Therefore, what are the types of mind that take you to an understanding of reality? So you can't go from not understanding, doubting, to right away understanding incontrovertibly. If it is something like subtle impermanence, emptiness, and so forth. So you need to go via correctly assuming. Being convinced in a fact. Correct belief is another aspect. Although I'm not sure, because belief, how strong is belief actually? But, I mean, belief couldn't be a doubtful mind, right? You believe in it or you don't. If you're undecided, it's hard to say you believe in it. So belief is actually a type of conviction, isn't it? So you may remember I talked about 3 types of faith. In Buddhism, there are 3 types of faith. So just allow me to repeat them. One is believing faith. Believing in something. Okay? Of course, based on reasoning, if you can, that'd be best. That's believing faith. Then there's joyful faith, or pure faith. I mean, sometimes pure faith, but that's not to be misunderstood. The other ones can be pure too. But a joyful kind of faith, just you see a person who inspires you, like you see His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and you're inspired. That is joyful faith. And then you aspire to become a Buddha, for instance. May I become a Buddha? That kind of aspiration. That is called aspirational faith. So there are 3 types of faith, and one of them is basically a correctly assuming consciousness. because you have faith in something that exists. It's a positive type of mind, a virtuous type of mind that leads you closer to Dharma practice, etc. Does that make sense? All right. So, correctly assuming consciousnesses are conceptual minds. They're always conceptual. Sense consciousnesses don't assume. That correctly apprehend their existent objects of engagement without incontrovertibly knowing, that is, realizing them. Examples for such non-valid cognizers are conceptual awareness that correctly assumes that the planet Earth is round, a conceptual awareness that correctly assumes that a produced phenomenon, such as a table, etc., changes moment by moment, and thus correctly perceiving subtle impermanence, a conceptual awareness that correctly assumes the existence of past and future lives, and so forth. Well, from a Buddhist point of view, that's a correct assumption. These correctly assuming consciousnesses arise in dependence on someone explaining us something. In dependence on correct reasons, on incorrect reasons, on personal experience, and so forth. I mean, we can have correct assumption even though it comes from an incorrect reason, right? That's not encouraged. It's like if you can, if someone tells you so, right? That's really not reliable. That's not a. It's not. We distinguish between correctly assuming consciousnesses that are stable and those that are not that stable, right? So, for instance, if someone just tells you it is so, or you read it when you Googled it, you found some website and you Googled it, then it's a correct consciousness where someone told you so. And you haven't understood the reasons. You just read someone who, I don't know, is highly regarded, who has a PhD from a, I don't know, fancy university somewhere, I don't know, maybe in the US or Britain. And so then you believe that to be true because the person said so. That is one correct assumption. And like I said, we have that correct assumption about your birth date. There's no correct reasoning they can use to establish that you were born on a certain day. You just believe the person who told you so. That is your parents. And there are a lot of things, like telling you stuff about the past, if you have no memory of those, or you weren't yet alive. History, right? I mean, I don't know. Let's assume that the stuff you learn in your history lessons, they were all true. Then you all have correctly assuming consciousnesses that are all based on someone telling you. Because how can you prove that certain things... I mean, certain things you can prove that they took place. Of course you can. Because you have the results nowadays and you can infer, based on those resultant states, that this must have occurred. But it's really difficult. Very difficult. So, you know, there's this, for instance, like we have... First of all, was the Buddha alive or not? Did the Buddha ever live? Right? From a Buddhist point of view, and I want to say that, I think this aspect is quite important, not to do with whether the Buddha lived or not, something else. But anyway, we don't know whether the Buddha lived. Do we have incontrovertible proof? I'm not sure we do. I don't think so. But anyway, it doesn't matter that much, because it's really more the teachings that the Buddha gave. So that's more important. His life story is a teaching in itself. Whether historically this was also correct, we don't know. Okay. But I do believe it doesn't make sense, etc. But then there's a bit of a problem in Buddhism. There's a bit of a historical problem. For instance, where the scholars disagree. So, I find that very important, and at some point in time I always talk about it. Some people say the Mahayana teachings, which includes Tantra, was not taught by the Buddha. What is their conclusion? Their conclusion is that historically, I don't want to call them Hinayana, the Pali tradition, okay? Actually, this Homus, the Dalai Lama, uses different words nowadays. He refers to the Hinayana tradition as the Pali tradition, or the foundational Buddhism. It's the foundation, the foundation for all the other Buddhist traditions. And then you have what is called the Mahayana, or the universal tradition, or it is also referred to the Nalanda tradition, which is based on, of course, the foundation, but then puts a lot of emphasis on compassion, great compassion, on, of course, bodhicitta, everyone can become enlightened, which is less emphasized in the in the foundational tradition, and lower, by the way. Lower, I think this word lower doesn't mean inferior. It means foundation. Where do you put a foundation of a building? On the roof? No, you put it at the bottom. So lower doesn't necessarily mean inferior. Okay, in our language it means that. In Tibetan, it also member can mean lower, and like as in like lower, and it can also mean inferior. So it doesn't necessarily. And anyway, Tibetans were on their own. There were no Pali practitioners, so it wasn't even a problem. You weren't offending anyone because they were on their own there. So, but nowadays I think it's important to use the language correctly. But the point is, we have the foundational teachings and we have the universal teachings or the Bodhisattva teachings. Okay. Now, they appeared later in India. They appeared later. So, the mainstream teachings were the Pali tradition, the foundational teachings, and the Nalanda tradition, although it was from the point of view of what Nagarjuna explained in some of the great masters of the past, it always existed, but it wasn't taught to the mainstream Buddhists at the time. Because it was overwhelming at the time. I mean, you may think, well, why is it not overwhelming now? Well, because the people who learn about it now were probably around at the time of the Buddha, would have found that overwhelming. Over the years, they ripened enough for those teachings to be now comprehensive to them. Okay, so therefore, this is the point of view. The point of view of the Nalanda tradition, where they say they were taught by the Buddha. Buddha taught Tantra. He taught all this. But he taught it secretly, which meant that only very few people knew about those teachings and passed them on. And then they became a mainstream kind of part of the teachings, only around, 6th century, 7th century, etc. But then some scholars say, no, because it appeared later, it wasn't taught by the Buddha. Now, just saying because it doesn't appear later, is that a correct reason to assume it wasn't taught by the Buddha? So that reminds me of something, I think it was Heidegger who said that, the philosopher Heidegger. I'm not sure, I think it was him. He was once told by one of his students, not surprising that the earth, that people think the earth, the sun revolves around the earth. So he asked, why is that not surprising? He said, well, but it looks that way. And he said, well, what would it look like if it was the other way around? Pardon?
Wittgenstein. It was Wittgenstein.
It was a Wittgenstein. Okay, I always get those two mixed up. Anyway, what would it look like if it was the other way around? What would it look like if it were the case that actually the sun revolves around the earth revolves around the sun? It would be exactly the same. So why do we assume one thing over the other? Because it maybe looks more like it seems to suggest. So exactly the same thing. Why come to the conclusion the Buddha didn't teach it just because it appeared later? If it was the way that Nagarjuna explained it, that would be the case. Now to doubt it is okay, but to be so decisive about it, like there's some scholars in the West now that say Tantra and Mahayana was never taught by the Buddha, right? And then come on, why? Just because it appeared later? Well, even if it were the case as it is taught by, for instance, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, then it would still appear later. So how can you conclude? That would be like saying, well, it looks like the sun rises, therefore, that's the conclusion we should come to. But of course, we know that's not the case. That's not, even though it maybe seems more likely to us, but even if something appears in such a way that it makes it more likely, doesn't make it true. And why am I stressing this? Because the Mahayana teachings or the Nalanda teachings are really beautiful. So some people think, well, I only want to hear what the Buddha said. So they're not interested, right? They say like, oh, well, the Buddha didn't teach it, it was made up. They have this sense like just an ordinary person made it up, and for that reason they stay away from it. And that's a problem, right? I mean, in the end, as long as it works, it doesn't matter. If it works great, no problem. But in the past, historically, people were put away by it because they believed in the Buddha, they had great faith in him. But if it didn't come from the Buddha, well, why would I learn it? Does that make sense? And so this kind of reasoning, where we take a clue, a cue, we take a cue, and then assume it's the one thing over another, even though the other possibility is still a possibility, well, that's wrong. So that's just something about correct assumption and so forth. So even when we're assuming, based on a reason, observation, etc., we have to be super careful. So there's assumption coming from another person telling us, then we use correct reasons. We may even come to a correct assumption, we may even correctly assume something, although it's an incorrect reason that led us there. Right? Maybe an incorrect reason. What would be an example of an incorrect reason leading you to a correct assumption? What could be an example of that?
When a ship sails at horizon, it doesn't fall. So probably the Earth is round and not flat. But that's not the illusion.
No, you need to have a correct assumption. You come to a correct conclusion, but based on a wrong reason.
Sound isn't permanent because it's a permanent phenomenon.
That's too abstract. Like something in everyday life.
You should play devil's advocate out of anger.
You
Playing devil's advocate out of anger, you're just
devil's advocate.
agreeing with someone.
But I'm talking about a correct assumption. Being a devil's advocate doesn't mean you're as a correct assumption.
You
Like
might have assumed the right argument back, but you just doing it to annoy them.
But no, but that's not an assumption. You're just throwing something. I mean, you yourself are convinced of something, but for the wrong reason.
Okay.
Yes.
Sun rises at a certain time, but the rays are 8 minutes late. We see it 8 minutes later.
But where's the correct assumption? Where's the wrong view?
Mathematicians do this all the time. They call it proof by contradiction. For instance, a simple example. If they want to prove that the sum of three angles of a triangle is 180 degree, they start by assuming that it is not 180 degree, and they arrive at a contradiction. And therefore, they say, therefore, the sum of three angles of a triangle is 180 degrees.
Okay, all right, that would work. It's not an everyday kind of example, but right? No, it's great. Okay, that's good. Right? Or you may, for the wrong reason, eat very healthy food. You correctly assume this is good for you, but you have the wrong reason for thinking so, right? Okay, so, I mean, there are plenty of examples. So for the wrong reason, you go jogging. It's actually good for you, but you believe it's good for you for the wrong reason, right?
Will this be an example? So you assume that you might meet a traffic and you leave a little early from the home, and it actually happens that way?
Can you say again?
So you leave little early from the home,
yes,
assuming that you will meet traffic,
yes,
and
yes.
it actually happens that way. So,
But you're correctly assuming from the beginning, and the reasoning. What gave you?
Wrong assumption. It may or may not.
No. The example is a correct assumption based on a wrong reason.
So you meet traffic because you think it's depending on the hour, but it depends on the day of the week.
So you correctly assume that's it. Everyday example. So you do leave earlier because you correctly assume you're going to hit traffic, but your reason for believing that you're going to hit traffic has to do with the hour, with the time you leave your house. But in actuality, it has not to do with the time, it has to do with the day of the week. That's an example that works, yes. And of course we can make up examples, but we can still, a lot of our correct assumptions are not necessarily based on correct reasons, right? Right? Okay.
Do you want to take a break, Geshema?
Oh, we need to take a break. Okay, let's take a break. There's no one sick, right? You're all okay physically? No overeating? All right. Okay. Anyway, someone just made a suggestion, so I don't know how you feel about it, but saying that it was a little disruptive to have question and answers at the beginning of a session rather to have it towards the end. Okay, I can see there's agreement. Okay. All right, let's try that. To have, question and answer, therefore, towards the end. I'll try and make a time. In an hour we have lunch. So 11:15, we'll start question and answer. Okay. That gives us a half an hour. And then I also read some of those here. All right, so going back to correctly pursuing consciousness, there's still... Was there someone sitting there on that chair? No. There's a lady there. Is anyone missing? Yes, she's missing. And there's someone else. Oh, okay. No, she left. Okay. All right. Oh, well, we need to continue. All right, so that correctly assumes, etc. Oh yeah, so independence on correct reason, on incorrect reason, on personal experience, of course. Right? You don't experience what you're correctly assuming, but something other, and then based on that, you correctly assume. Okay. Oftentimes we think we know something. I mentioned that before. We think we have realized it, we know it, we incontrovertibly know it. However, in reality, we merely draw a conclusion about a fact because we've heard or read about it. Does that sound right? Most of it what we think we know. Or it seems right. I'm not saying stop saying I know. I'm not saying that. You can say that. But to really check, do I incontrovertibly know this? Or do I only know the facts about it, having read them, having heard them? So we read about it, we heard about it, and it seems right. Even if we investigate it, we do not take this far enough to come to an incontrovertible knowledge or realization. Therefore, many things we say we know are actually the objects of our correctly assuming consciousnesses. Okay? So, I think that's important to understand. And so, with regard to emptiness, we need to make a special effort. Certain things we need to know to progress on the path. We don't need to know that much. Then, after having explained these different types of awarenesses and everything so far, then we can look at the process of cultivating a direct realization. Okay? Because that is considered important in Buddhism. That's considered important in the sense that, like I said, from a Buddhist point of view, our misperception of reality is the main problem. So, not perceiving how things really are, that is our main problem. And since that's our main problem, it becomes obvious we need to know how things really are. And I already mentioned that it is not enough to just correctly assume the lack of inherent existence. We need to come to incontrovertibly know that. But it's also not enough to know this conceptually. We need to know it directly. Alright? So direct experience versus conceptual understanding. And therefore there's a step-by-step, there's a process where we get from not having any understanding, in fact having a wrong view about things, and then leading us to a direct experience, in the best case scenario, of emptiness. But you can also have a direct experience of subtle impermanence, for instance. Everyone has a sense of what subtle impermanence refers to, right? That not just our mind and body, that all those are constantly changing, but every situation is always different. So death is an important part of that. Today is the youngest you'll ever be. It's the youngest day of your life. Right? We're basically racing towards our own death. So it's good to take that into consideration. How much have we planned? And how much realistically can we actually do? How many years we got left? I mean, we can do the math, right? And that doesn't mean we have those years left, because we could be dead tomorrow. So that is one way of thinking of impermanence, but of course that's just course. But to become aware that everything is in a constant flux, so then we don't try to hold on to situation, we wanting desperately to repeat them. We can let go and just kind of enjoy them as they arise. If they're there, fine. If they're not there, not. So our life will become a lot easier if we can just understand impermanence, subtle impermanence, on a very deep level, not just intellectually. And then that understanding, although it's conceptual, you again transform it into direct perception. And the process here is explained in this next paragraph. The wisdom aspect of Buddhism is mainly concerned with cultivating the direct antidote to the root of cyclic existence, the ignorance that apprehends phenomena to exist intrinsically. The only direct antidote to this ignorance and all the other afflictions that it induces, as well as their seeds and imprints. Alright, so the seed of anger is the potential for anger to arise. Okay? I can remove anger temporarily, but the potential for anger, if I've only removed it temporarily, that means the potential for anger to arise is still there. So it's important to totally uproot cyclic existence, which basically means remove the root, the ignorance of cyclic existence. Because if the ignorance gives rise to anger, I cannot uproot anger without uprooting the ignorance. I cannot. I can temporarily remove the anger. I can practice patience that will temporarily reduce my anger or maybe temporarily get rid of it. But when I only practice patience, practicing patience is very important. You need to practice patience. Practice love, compassion as antidotes to anger. Practice detachment and look at the negative qualities of something to overcome attachment. Also an understanding of subtle impermanence helps us to overcome our attachment, that is, reduce our attachment and maybe temporarily remove it. So you see there are many different antidotes to these particular afflictive emotions, afflictive states. However, these antidotes that I just described, first of all, they cannot totally uproot our anger, our attachment. Secondly, whatever is an antidote, a temporary antidote to anger, is not a temporary antidote to attachment. Whatever is a temporary antidote to attachment is not one to anger, for anger or against anger, or an antidote to anger. So, therefore, the only antidote that is lasting is the understanding, the perception of emptiness, the direct realization of emptiness. That not only temporarily removes anger and so forth, it removes its seeds, and seed is just a word that is used to describe potential for it to arise again. So if you have the seed for a sprout, you may not have the sprout right now, but you have the potential for the sprout to rise again. So in the same way, if you haven't totally eradicated anger, the potential for it to rise again is still there, as long as you have ignorance. So uprooting, that is getting rid of ignorance, does not merely temporarily remove our anger and temporarily removes one or another afflictions. It removes all of them with their potential to arise again and their imprints. Now we distinguish between anger, its seed, and its imprint. Are you all familiar with this? Who's not familiar with this wording? The anger, the seed of anger, and the imprint of anger. Who doesn't know what that means? Okay.
Imprint and seed is, I thought it's the same, similar.
There's the same, similar? No. Similar maybe, but not the same. So, like the seed, for instance, the seed of anger. What is the seed of anger? I just said it. The potential for it to rise again. Are you angry right now? No. I hope not. So if you're not angry right now, you don't have anger. There's no anger in your mind right now. But you have the potential. If the right circumstances come together, your anger will arise again. And that is the case because you have the seed, you have the potential for anger to arise. What is the imprint of anger? What is the imprint of anger? What does that refer to? Pardon?
Karmic imprints.
Yeah, we talk about karmic imprints, but what does that actually mean? What is an imprint? What is the imprint of anger? Pardon? What is the imprint of attachment? What is the imprint of ignorance?
The previous moment of anger. It's
The
the thing that's on your mind stream.
The thing that's on your mind stream. Yes. It's the thing on your mind stream. I agree.
What's going to ripen in the future?
How does it ripen in the future?
The tendency to be angry again.
No.
That's the seed.
That's the seed. Well, the imprint can, the seed is merely the potential. The imprint can lead to it's responsible for how often you get angry. Okay? So, but let me explain a little bit. This is a really important idea in Buddhism, and it's not that hard to understand. For instance, we have certain tendencies, like habits. If you take the example of smoking, or you take the example of taking certain drugs, or eating certain foods, or even having tendencies to starve yourself, or what have you, right? So those are formed by habits, as in and this is all actually when we talk about eating and so forth. Of course, it's all mental. In the end, it all comes down to the mind that, of course, controls our body, our eating, how much we eat, how much we don't eat, etc. How much we exercise, how much we, etc. Right? All these daily kind of activities we engage in, a lot of those are habitual. So the word habit. the first time it's difficult to do, right? But then when we do it a few times, we form a habit. Now, where does that habit come from? Have you ever wondered, where does that habit come from? Why does it get easier if I do it once, if I do it twice? Like meditating, for instance. The first time it's difficult to sit down, but the next time it's easier, it gets easier and easier. It becomes a habit. And that is due to imprints left on the mind. Imprints left. So the kind of residue that is left on the mind every time you have a thought. Right? There's a residue left, if you like. Now, it's not mental, it's not physical, it's one of those things that is in between, neither physical nor mental, but it's still an impermanent phenomenon. So you have karmic imprints, for instance, too. Now, not every imprint is described to be a karmic imprint, because some imprints ripen in the form of experiences, but some are merely habitual, like habitual ones. So basically, the fact that we do certain things, even though we have a basic mind, but our mind differs from the point of view of our likes, dislikes, our habits, and so forth, it all has to do with residues that were left in the mind. And they're very hard to describe, so we just use the generic term imprints. And there are different types of them. So for instance, you can have a karmic imprint of a negative action, some residues left in your mind. And so you can purify just the negative aspect of that. The imprint may still be there, but it's now become neutralized. Okay? But in what all these imprints do, they cloud our mind. To a certain degree, they cloud our mind. In particular, the imprints that were left every time we're angry, every time there's an afflictive emotion that arises in our mind. The afflictive emotion may be gone, but it's left an imprint in our mind. Okay? And so this functioning of imprints, it's not really explained in great detail, because I guess it's just not seen as important to understand it, but it must be extremely complicated, as in like the different functions, how they act, how you purify an imprint, but you remove the imprint as such, just the potential to give rise to a negative result, for instance. So this is just my theory. For years I've been thinking about how do imprints work, and I don't know exactly, but parts of it I confirmed with my teachers, and it didn't seem to contradict anything. So they never kind of objected to that explanation, and like I said, to me it makes perfect sense. But not to go into too much detail and too many details. Every time we have, for instance, the misperception of reality, that of course also leaves an imprint. And so every imprint, depending on the mind, it leaves a particular residue. So what is very clear from the text is that every time we perceive reality, we apprehend actively, we grasp at inherent existence with a mental consciousness, it leaves a particular imprint, which then accounts for the fact that inherent existence always appears. So this is the function this particular imprint has. Every time you grasp at inherent existence, it reinforces our appearance of inherent existence. That's why inherent existence appears to us. The reason it appears to us is that we have this basic misapprehension, and that leaves an imprint which clouds our mind to such a degree that although we don't actively grasp at inherent existence with all our different awarenesses, but the appearance is ever present. Does that make sense? So every time, because we have grasping at inherent existence all day long, again and again and again, even just for a short moment, and it always leaves some kind of residue, and that residue then gives rise to that appearance. Now, you can theoretically, you can actually remove the misperception of reality. You totally uproot it so that the seed, that is the potential for it to rise again, is gone. But it takes a little longer to get rid of those residues. Okay? So that you can only remove after you removed your misperception. Now, the analogy for that, you've probably heard before, it's quite simple. If you take garlic and you put it in a wooden vessel, the wooden vessel, that's you as a person, your mind. The wooden vessel is your mind. And the garlic is our grasping, our ignorance, our grasping at inherent existence. That's like the garlic, okay? It's smelly, it's like garlic, of course, is not bad, but it's just an example because it's a smelly substance. So you can remove the garlic, but the smell is left behind. There's still a smell. That's the residue left from the garlic. So the garlic is gone, but it's left a residue. That's like the imprint left from our grasping at inherent existence. So first you remove the garlic, and then you remove the smell. That's still part of the mind, but that can also be removed. Again, through realizing emptiness directly, through meditating very intensely, you can remove that. Once you remove the garlic, once you remove ignorance, you have become what's called an arhat, a liberated being. But you still have the appearance of inherent existence, although you never grasp at inherent existence again, and therefore are never angry again, are never have desire again, etc. Like afflictive desire. Ordinary desire, sure. So, therefore, you still have the appearance of inherent existence, but you got rid of the garlic. And then, when you wish to become a Buddha, that aspiration empowers your wisdom, realizing emptiness directly. And with that realization, every time it arises in your mind, you now eliminate also these imprints, the smell of the garlic. And when you've removed all the imprints, you're Buddha. That's what awakening of Buddhahood means. You just remove what's extra. Have the same mind that we have. You don't need anything from the outside. In fact, enlightenment is not about gaining something. It is mainly about removing what's in the way, what's extra.
Very quick clarification. So removing the garlic is like removing the potential.
The potential for it to arise again, yes. So you remove the garlic means you eliminate ignorance and the potential for that ignorance to arise again. And therefore you eliminate anger and attachment and the potential for those to arise again. But they still leave a residue in their mind. That is not yet gone. So, I'm not done yet. So the ignorance, it leaves the imprint, it leaves the residue for the appearance of inherent existence. The anger also leaves something. The anger, when you have anger, if you're frequently angry, it leaves a residue such that even though you remove your anger, when you're an arhat, you may speak harshly and come across as unfriendly. That's just the habit. That's just the habit that has left over from the time when you had anger. There's no longer any anger or resentment. In fact, you have love for sentient beings, patience, etc. But just at the outside, our behavior, of course, is determined by our mind. And you come across as like a little harsh, maybe even as angry, but you're not. It's just due to those imprints. Can you see like these tendencies? We act in certain ways, right? I mean, maybe some people, they were very angry when they were younger, and even when they're older, they're still a little bit rough, but that anger is no longer governing their action. It's just this habit they've formed. Then the other example they give for attachment. Attachment also leaves imprints. So that would be like the imprints when they say, like Lama Tsongkhapa says, like when you jump around like a monkey. No, it's a bit like when you're like right away excited and like, ooh, like this kind of like not being able to sit still. I don't mean that. Of course, like many arhats have great concentration, like incredible states of concentration, but they have these tendencies possibly to be like, ooh, like very, very excited. So that's usually out of attachment. We get attached to a good situation and we start like jumping around, being really, really like exaggeratedly, in an exaggerated fashion, excited. Now you can remove the attachment, that's long gone. But the tendency to still act that way, that is due to the imprints. And as you become a Buddha, you remove all those. They all will be gone until those tendencies are no longer there. And then you act out of the pure awakened mind of a Buddha, which we cannot imagine right now. It seems pretty boring when we hear that. Like, who wants to be like that? No more tendencies. But basically they obscure our mind. They obscure our mind. And so Buddha, what's so special about a Buddha is that a Buddha knows other beings' minds and can be the perfect guide. Have you seen yourself? I mean, I'm sure we all know this frustration, this frustrating feeling when someone comes with their problems and they ask you for advice. And you just don't know what to tell. I mean, I could tell them this, I could tell them, but whether that's exactly the right thing, we never know, right? And we wish sometimes, if I could just tell them, this is what you should do, and then if they listen and they do it, it actually solves their problem. So that's what a Buddha can do, which is why it's so amazing to be a Buddha, because you can now really guide sentient beings in the most effective way to reach the state of a Buddha. Whether they do it or not, that's up to them. Okay? But from your side, you've given the best support. All right? Please wait until 11:15, if you can. Yes? Please wait. Okay, great. Does that make sense? Right. So, therefore, this correct understanding, which helps us to remove ignorance with its seeds, the potential for it to rise again, and even after that, the imprints. Okay? So now, hopefully it's a little clearer what we mean with seeds, just the potential for something to arise. Saying you remove the seeds is the same as saying you've permanently gotten rid of the garlic. It's not like you've lifted the garlic or you threw it up and it comes down again. That would be like temporarily kind of removing it, right? Kind of tossing the thing, it's up in the air, but it comes down again. So that would be like, that's not usually not described as part of the analogy, but you might use it as like temporary removing the garlic, tossing it up and then it comes down again. That would be like removing it temporarily, but not with its potential. Totally taking it out, so it can no longer get back in. That would be like removing the afflictions, the anger, etc., through removing the ignorance, its root cause, and its seed, the potential for it to come again. And then the next step, after you've done that, then you can wash the dish itself. You can wash the wooden vessel itself. That would be like removing the imprints. So the way to do that, in order to, the only direct antidote to this ignorance and all the other afflictions that it induces, as well as their seeds and imprints, is the yogic direct perceiver directly realizing emptiness. Therefore, every time it manifests in a practitioner's continuum, it irreversibly eliminates one of the layers of afflictive or cognitive obstructions. Afflictive obstructions, okay, there's a new term here. Afflictive obstructions are those seeds, afflictive emotions, that are obstructing us from becoming liberated. Okay? That which is in the way for us to reach liberation. In other words, the garlic. The garlic. The garlic, that refers to the afflictive emotions. So, ignorance, anger, attachment, jealousy. Those states of mind that harm us and that are the result of our misapprehension of reality. Removing that misapprehension removes all these afflictive emotions, and those are described, and once we remove them, we attain liberation, which is why these afflictions are called afflictive obstructions, or obstructions to liberation. Both words are used. Afflictive obstructions or obstructions to liberation. And then you're left with the garlic smell. Not the garlic smell. You're left with the smell. Those are called cognitive obstructions. They keep you from cognizing all phenomena. So they are the obstructions to enlightenment, or, as they're also called, obstructions to cognition, cognitive obstructions. So they're just, like I said, Buddhahood is just about removing what's in the way. Obstructions. Okay. And the obstructions limit us. We're limited by our own obstructions due to the root ignorance. And only a realization of emptiness. So the realization of emptiness is like a vacuum cleaner. It's like a vacuum cleaner. Okay? So it's a vacuum cleaner. And how strong the vacuum cleaner is, how much it removes, what does it depend on? What does so if you think of your mind, right? If you think of your mind being full of crumbs, crumpy stuff like breadcrumbs, etc. Right? So that's what the vacuum cleaner first removes. If it's not very strong, it first gets rid of those kind of coarser, kind of superficial, at the surface lying kind of. But then to go really deep inside the carpet, what's inside the carpet, like the stains, those stains that are harder to get out, the volume, no, not the volume, but the strength, the power. The strength of the vacuum cleaner needs to be increased. So what made it possible in the first place for the mind realizing emptiness directly, the vacuum cleaner, to remove the obstructions to liberation. What made that possible?
You need to turn the vacuum cleaner on.
How do you turn it on? No, it's your aspiration to become liberated. It's your wish. That's called renunciation. Your wish to become liberated. When you have the wish to become liberated and then realize emptiness directly, that mind realizing emptiness directly is influenced by your aspiration to become liberated. So the mind removes exactly that which needs to be removed. And then if you take it further, if you don't just want to be liberated, but you want to become a Buddha, then the vacuum cleaner will become strong enough to suck in even the very subtle obscurations to enlightenment. So really, it's your aspiration. It's your wish. That's why the method is very important. In particular, the method that is the aspiration of your goal. You want to become liberated, you need to wish to become liberated. Otherwise you won't ever be liberated. And you will not be able to develop a mind that is so powerful it can remove all these obscurations. It's your own mind that wishes to reach a certain state, and therefore another of your minds, which is the direct realization of emptiness, will remove what's in the way. That's how the mind works. It's amazing. In fact, you're in samsara because you want to be in samsara. You're here because you want to be here. I mean, come on, we're all attached to samsara. If you weren't attached to samsara, you wouldn't be reborn in samsara. We're like prisoners with the gates open, and we're like, I like my prison. I love it. I don't know what's out there. I don't know out there exists. So I kind of turn away from the door, facing the wall, thinking, I love it, I love it, I love it. I want to be a Buddhist practitioner, that's a good thing, but I can't let go. We're like prisoners with open doors, but we don't even face the doors. Okay? The moment you wish to go outside, then your legs will take you outside. That's how it works. So in the same way, our perception of reality, the mind that realizes emptiness directly, that is like the legs that take you out. The vacuum cleaner, whatever analogy you want to use. So it's the wish to do so that governs this antidote, the mind realizing emptiness directly. You must have both. Because otherwise the mind realizing emptiness directly won't remove anything. Because you don't have that intention to do so. It needs to be strengthened. It needs to be affected by your aspiration. Does that make sense? And then further, as you've removed the garlic, the mind needs to have the wish to clean itself from the smell. So again, the mind that realizes emptiness directly, now it starts actually going deeper in terms of the aspiration. It's become stronger to remove those cognitive obscurations, those obscurations to enlightenment that are the imprints. And the moment that the last one is gone, that is the moment you enlighten. That's it. It's all about cleaning. Cleaning your mind, right? Purifying, removing what's extra in the mind. So it's therefore really important. The aspiration is important, but that's not so hard to understand. It's much harder to develop this aspiration. To turn around and say, I don't want to be in prison. To allow our attachment to loosen its grip to such a degree that you see the meaninglessness of being driven by attachment, of like just having our life governed by I want this, I want that, just these external objects that are falsely believed to give me lasting happiness, and actually turn my attention to those objects that can really give me happiness. That is this aspiration. But then the correct understanding of reality, that is harder, in the sense that the understanding is harder. Once you have the understanding, you won't lose it. But to get there is difficult, and that's why the process of realization, we need to go through it. And it's really not difficult. After your understanding of what we've done, it's not that hard. Tim, you read it in advance, did you? Oh, no, you didn't. Okay. Did anyone read it in advance? Yes. Was it very difficult?
No.
No, there you go. After lunch, you won't be too overwhelmed. All right, we have time for questions now. You were first, yes.
Okay, so I want to understand about imprints. What happens when you're watching your attachment in a meditative state? So you see an attachment and you let it go.
Yes.
But the fact that the attachment was still there,
yes,
maybe for not a very long time, compared
yes,
to when
good
you're not
question.
watching it.
Yes.
So the imprint is still there, right?
Yes.
Maybe lighter imprint?
Yes, you're right. So although you may actually allow for your attachment to arise to then watch it, so are you creating an imprint? I don't think you need to worry that much about that kind of imprint, because you intentionally allowed it. You in a controlled environment, you allowed it to arise to then observe it. And your observation of it left another positive imprint. So I don't think you necessarily reinforced it.
It's like a plus minus.
Yeah. You know what I sometimes wonder? How about actors and actresses? Right? They have to be angry. So I once spoke to an Israeli actress, and we were just driving in the car. It's so nice with Israelis, you become friends after 2 minutes. So drive somewhere, make a new friend. And so she was this girl who was studying to become an actress. So she told me, I asked her, what is that like? And she said, well, we have to cry. We have to get angry. And I said, so how do you get angry? She said, I have to really think of something that makes me angry, and then I feel anger, and then I can act it out. I was thinking, wow, you generate imprints of anger as a living. If you act in a movie where you have to be angry. Of course, there's more to a movie. But every time I see someone acting in a movie becoming angry, I'm always wondering, I wonder whether he or she is really angry. And boy, they get paid a lot of money, but I hope the imprints are not so bad. I don't know. Every time I can't help it. I can't help wonder.
But their intention is to have a good movie.
Yes. So there's the intention to have a good movie and become famous and rich. Yeah. I mean, maybe the intention is to entertain people and make them happy, and they don't care about the fame and the money. Then that's probably a positive motivation. In the case the motivation is a different one, I don't know.
There was this story that they also get from Geshema about Leonardo DiCaprio when he did The Aviator, right? So he had an OCD.
The what? Aviator?
The Aviator.
Oh, that movie.
It's a movie, and he had the OCD disorder during the movie. So for him to get into the character, he was, practicing that in a way. And then when the movie was over, he had to go to therapy because he had OCD.
That's interesting.
We found Keith Ledger in The Dark Knight.
Yeah, that was
He died.
That's a movie?
Yeah, he played
Dark
like
Knight.
a character who's like a psychic, crazy. And because he's a method actor, he spent all his time as this character. Stopped himself in a dark room, crazy things.
It's great for compassion, though. Right? You can really put yourself into a person, like they're suffering, etc. From that aspect, again, is great. But of course, the imprints can be dangerous. Yes. Pardon?
He died.
Oh, he even died. Oh God. That's okay, go ahead. Yes. The question. Yes.
So I just want to know if there is the connection with imprints or seeds with the level of dispositions or karmic formations.
Oh, is there a connection between seeds and karmic formations?
Yeah, seeds or imprints. Are they like...
Oh, okay. Oh, this is where it gets a little confusing, because sometimes the word seed and imprint is used interchangeably. Right? That's confusing. But, of course, we also have, for instance, to give you another example, sometimes we use, like, a cause is a condition and a condition is a cause. They actually mean the same thing. But the moment you say cause-condition, cause means something specific, condition means something specific. The moment you have the pair, it means something specific. Which cause is that which transforms into the result, and condition is the cooperative condition which assists that cause that transforms into the result in that process. So even though cause and condition are equivalent, in that context they're not. Another example is here seed and imprint. In general, seed is a potential and imprint is a potential, so therefore you use them interchangeably. When you use them as a pair, seed, imprint, then seed means merely the potential for a mind to arise, that's it. Imprint is anything that may determine the frequency, how frequent that mind arises, with the kind of force it arises, right? Depending on the external circumstances, will it arise forcefully or less? That's because of imprints. Plus, the seed, the potential for a mind to arise, can be gone, and the imprint can still influence the mind, although in a slightly different way, because it arises strongly, is no longer an option, which was an option when the imprint was there. Now it's only about certain habits that we're still stuck with. Now, coming to your question, a karmic imprint. You can use the word seed and imprint interchangeably, which you sometimes come across. But in general, a karmic imprint, when you have seed and imprint both, you don't call the karmic imprint a seed. Because the seed is like arising as something, but it doesn't arise as something, it just causes an experience. Okay? So when you have the two, the couple, seed imprint, then the karmic left over, like after the action is complete, of course karma is the action. Once the action is complete, planning a murder, for instance. So I planned the murder. I acted out the murder. All that left imprints on my mental continuum, but now I've killed the person. Now the act of killing, this whole plan that I had, my mind is no longer thinking of that, but the imprints were left on my mental continuum. And now I believe these imprints have different function. It can be one imprint, and of course you can't count them as such because they're not physical, but let's say an imprint from killing. One aspect of it is the karmic imprint, one aspect. So it performs the function of giving rise to a certain experience. From that point of view, I describe it as a karmic imprint. From another point of view, it obstructs my mind. Therefore, I call it an afflictive obscuration. From another point of view, it leads me to the habit to kill again in the future, as long as I don't remove the wish to kill. So it has that. So it's one thing in the same way. What's your name again? I forget. Alex, that's right. Alex, from one point of view, he's a great cook. From one point of view, he's a clever student. From one point of view, he's a... what? No, she's just joking. You know, like a good student, they say a good cook and a good organizer, right? So it's the same person, but from the point of view of the different functions that you perform, I talk about Alex the cook, Alex the student, Alex the son. You're a son of your parents, you act in a certain way. So it's actually one person, but I can give you different names, because of the different functions you perform or describe you in different ways. So I look at it in the same way as an imprint left in the case of killing someone, taking that as an example, right? So,
I left no imprints.
Pardon? I take her imprints then. Okay, no, but you see, like an imprint. I mean, we all have imprints, probably from killing in the past, right? At the previous life, except they're not very obvious. So they're not strong enough for us to kill another person, for instance. But at a certain point in time, I mean, let's go back to the Middle Ages. Come on, if you read what people did. They had huge axes, and a lot of them just fought each other on the battlefield, like if you were a man, right? So I was thinking, oh my God, I must have, accumulated so much karma. If I was a worm in the meantime, okay, I was better off. But if I was a human being, I mean, war was so much part of everyday life, and no bombs, etc., that do the job for me. No, I had to go out and directly kill people. So I'm sure there were times in the past we did a lot of killing. Of course, the motivation may not have been one of hatred, etc. We were obliged to, but still we accumulate those, and we still probably have those in our continuum. But positive ones, of course, too. So let's be a little bit more positive. So love. We have imprints left from meditating on love. So from the point of view of leading to a positive experience, it's the imprint that gives rise, it's the karmic imprint. From the point of view of obscuring our mind, nonetheless, because an imprint is only left because it is induced by ignorance. So ignorance induces all our actions, even positive ones, which is why they're still called samsaric action. Only once you realize emptiness directly can your actions be influenced in such a way that they're no longer samsaric, they're no longer induced by our misperception. So they still obscure the mind. They have different, and they have there's the aspect of this one imprint, not karmic, not in terms of obscuring the mind, but the tendency to feel love spontaneously if a situation arises. Does that make sense? So karmic imprint is just one function of the mind that gives rise to an experience.
So it's the both of them, the action together, this duo,
yes.
The result of it, this is what is left on the limb of karmic formation.
So can you say that again?
So is it like, so if I resume, it's the results of this duo of karmic imprints and karmic seeds,
yes.
that leave as a residue on the second limb, in the 12 limb.
Oh, in the 12 links.
Yeah.
All right. You see, when you say of the 12 links of dependent arising, first you have ignorance, and then you engage in an action, right? Positive or negative. That action leaves a seed/imprint. So here in the 12 links, you don't use the pairs, seed here, imprint there. You just use the two interchangeably. You leave a seed, you leave a karmic imprint, something on your consciousness, okay, that then ripens. In this case, it's a karmic seed or a karmic imprint, using them interchangeably, that gives rise to a specific rebirth. Because not every karma is responsible for the rebirth we take. Only strong karma is. So a strong virtuous or non-virtuous karma gives rise to a particular rebirth within samsara. Yes. So then once you accumulated that action, it leaves an imprint until the moment of death arises. There's attachment. I don't want to die. I don't want to go out of existence. I want to exist. There's the wish to exist. You can't help it. Unless you realize emptiness directly, when you die, you will want to continue to exist. You can't control that. It becomes out of the misperception of reality. Strong self-grasping. Then one of those imprints ripens and you're reborn. That just describes that process. So here the karmic seed, the karmic imprint that is left on your continuum, you look at it only from the point of view of the experience, that is the rebirth it gives rise to. Does that make sense? Okay. But you can look at it from it performs other functions as well. Yes. Yes.
So when we take vows or precepts,
yes,
we're making wish to remove the seeds.
When we take vows, we take a wish to remove the seeds.
Or aspiration to remove the karma.
Well, what do you mean? You take it for the benefit to become enlightened, for the benefit of all sentient beings. And by implication, wishing for that, you mean you want to remove what's in the way. Yes. Mm-hmm.
So when you become a direct perceiver or arhat, it's still wish which is moving.
When you become a direct perceiver or an arhat is a direct perceiver. When you attain a yogic direct perceiver, and eventually, the first moment when you have a yogic direct perceiver realizing emptiness, you're no longer you're not an arhat, you're an arya, not an arhat. Okay, yes. An arya and an arhat are two different things. Arya in Buddhism means pakpa, the Tibetan word pakpa, which translates into arya, or a supreme one, right? Not the way it's been used during the Second World War. That's not what an arya means. Hitler took a lot from the Indian tradition. I mean, the swastika, just switching it around and using the word arya in a totally dwarfed way, right? Actually, arya means, in the Buddhist context, someone who's supreme in terms of their realization, their understanding. Okay? So an arya is someone who's realized emptiness directly. Yeah. Sorry, go on.
So does arya beings or yogic direct perceivers, they only have to remove cognitive obscurations?
No. Aryas, you are an arya once you realized emptiness directly. Now, that is the vacuum cleaner. Now, it depends on what you wish for. If you're an arya who wishes to become liberated, only liberated, then you will use that mind to remove what's in the way to be liberated. If you are an arya who wants to be fully enlightened, then your mind will eliminate what's in the way to become liberated, because you still have to remove the garlic before you can wash the dish. So you remove first what's in the way, but you continue on right away to remove what is in the way to become fully enlightened. Basically, it depends on what kind of person you were dealing with. Someone who just wants to become liberated, is not interested in enlightenment, or someone who wants to become enlightened right from the beginning. We say everyone will eventually become enlightened, but if you first wish to become liberated, you will stay with that for some time. To wish to become enlightened right from the beginning, that's your goal. You will move towards it faster. You will not take a break and enjoy your liberation. You'll just continue on. Right? So with regard to your question, it depends on the person. Right? It depends on the person. So being a yogic direct perceiver, yogic direct perceiver means the mind, but being a person who has a yogic direct perceiver in his or her continuum, what do they aim for? What's their aspiration? we need to ask, what do they aspire towards? To use that mind realizing emptiness directly in that appropriate way. Does that make sense?
It's still wish driving.
It's still the wish driving that mind. The wish directs the mind in what it removes. Okay? This mind, when you realize emptiness directly, you go into a meditative absorption for some time, and then while you're in that meditative absorption, the mind removes stains on the mind. It does that automatically. It's the mind itself that removes the stains that are on the mind itself, basically. Does that make sense? Or that are with the person, at least. Yes. Okay. People haven't said that much. You haven't said that much. Yes. I still remember your name. iPad. Go ahead. Sorry.
It's not funny for me.
Okay.
So I have a question. Like, for example, this morning
yes.
We were doing shamatha meditation.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So at that time, I'm trying to follow my breath.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Almost mind is completely empty.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Almost.
Empty of thoughts.
Yeah, empty of thoughts.
Yes.
Then, after one moment, I'm start planning the next traveling for the October, for example.
Oh, that's cute.
What is happening on that moment? How that thought is arising?
Okay, his question is, this morning he did shamatha meditation. He was able to empty his mind from all the thoughts. His mind was empty. And within a split second, he was planning his next trip in October. I hope I can say that loud. Right? Isn't that interesting? Right? Oh, join the club, right? I know exactly what you mean, right? And so, what is happening? What is happening? All right, interesting. Now, you learned a little bit about imprints and tendencies, right? Okay. Now, you have definitely left an imprint to just focus your mind, stop those thoughts, right? You've been able to keep that mind for a while, and that's amazing. You did it for maybe a second, maybe 5, maybe 10. That's amazing. But as we all have, we have these tendencies. Our mind is always running. We have very strong tendencies, very strong imprints in our mind of planning ahead, of reminiscing about the past, of planning the future. Those are the two. We're obsessed with the past and obsessed with the future. So in that case, it was like a mind planning ahead the future. And you can't help it. You held it for some time, but you can't suppress your residues. They will pop up sooner or later. You cannot suppress that. So an imprint ripened and you had right away very rapid planning for your trip. And you caught it. Very good. So your mindfulness, you were aware. It's not that you got up and you was like, what just happened? No, you can remember now that you caught yourself after a few moments. I don't know whether you planned the whole trip, but
If I let it happen, I can plan all trip.
If you let it happen, you plan the whole trip. But your mindfulness imprint actually now counteracted, you noticed. You see, you also had an imprint to first stay with just the breathing. Then another imprint ripened and gave rise to those thoughts you're planning. But you didn't plan to the end. Why? Because you noticed. Good news. That's very good news.
Thank you, but...
What?
It's not what I'm asking.
No, okay, then ask again.
It could be past memories as well. What I'm saying, this is, when I realize there is thought, it is like gross mind, right?
Yes.
So how many level of mind we have? And these thoughts, let's say I had it already as an imprint or sit, it doesn't matter. So how it is arising?
Well, first of all, his question is how many minds are active, coarse and subtle, how many are active? And so how is this arising, this imprint, right?
Yes.
Okay, well, you have only coarse minds. When you have coarse minds, you don't have subtle. When you have subtle, you don't have coarse. So by definition, because you were awake, although you were meditating, look, when we say coarse and subtle, of course, is relative, and it can be a little confusing. In general, in Tantra, we talk about 3 levels of mind. Coarse is when we're awake, subtle is when we're asleep or dying, and subtlest is when we're just before our mind leaves the body, when the subtle clear mind of death arises, that is subtlest. So only 3 levels. But that is very simplified. So on that coarse level, while you're awake, there are also slightly subtler ones and coarser ones. For instance, when you meditate, the mind is slightly subtle. It's slightly subtler. It's not as wild as it usually is in general, although it may feel very wild, and it can be wild, but usually it's slightly subtler. Okay? Now, in answer to your question, therefore, when you were very focused, I believe it was slightly subtler. But you have imprints because of attachment to planning ahead. Okay? We want to plan ahead. It's an attachment we have to be able to control what's going to happen. And there's a good aspect to that, but it can be such that right now you didn't have to plan. You didn't have to plan this morning. And still, out of our attachment to control the future, out of your habit to plan, you probably are good at it, or you do it usually, so it's a mixture of different aspects that came in your mind, that came through, right? So it's because of these imprints, you had like a subtler mind, but imprints of coarser minds, they ripen all the time when you're awake, usually anyway, so you can suppress them that long while you meditate, or you can stop them for that long, but eventually they come back again. That's what happened. That's how I see it. Does that answer your question or not? Still not.
Because what I'm saying, for example, I have so many things that I need to think actually before that October, let's say.
So you have so many things you have to think.
What is choosing that thoughts from where?
Well, there's no self that's choosing those thoughts, so there's no I. It's just different types of mind, different imprints you've left, and they work perfectly together. Everything you've done in the past, your upbringing, all that left imprints in your mind, and when certain circumstances come together, they pop up. I can't tell you.
Isn't it a self-defense of the I, kind of?
But there's no I as such that controls that, right?
Not the I itself in itself, but it was so used to always have a thought coming. That it makes us feel like there's an I. So
right.
When there's like a silence in our mind, it's like, oh no, and it's coming again.
Yeah, so attachment to thoughts, like I'm saying. So, like, let's leave the I out, because it may get confusing. You have so many different awarenesses, right? And they pop up at different times. And some are stronger than others, because of the imprints, because of the residues. So, I cannot tell you, this is very subtle, what exactly gave rise to exactly that moment you wanting to plan. So, Alex suggested, usually that's what you do, so you enjoy doing it. There's a type of attachment, there's a residue, and that's what gave rise to it. It's just an interplay of different minds, right? And because of imprints, because of past habits, some imprints stronger, less strong, depending on external factors, right? It could just be the sound you hear that reminds you of something that gives rise to that. It's an interplay of many causes and conditions. There's no room for an I that does all that, because in the end, it's just, even without an I, it's all happening, right? So it's just different awarenesses doing that. And like I said, I cannot tell you the exact cause, but it's an interplay of different imprints in the mind, therefore different habits, different karmic imprints that ripen in the form of a certain environment, which again triggers certain minds, and there's just that intricate interplay. Sorry, no other answer than that, and I'm sure it doesn't answer your question. Sorry. All right, yes.
At the beginning of today's session, you were talking about when we were revising about correct perceived
yes.
wrong consciousnesses, etc., etc.
Yes.
And you were talking about dreams,
mm-hmm.
and I didn't quite catch what you said exactly, and I'm still a little bit confused. So obviously there are dreams where we are not aware that we are dreaming,
mm-hmm.
like we do most nights, and then the lucid dreaming. So
mm-hmm.
in the case that we are just dreaming a normal dream, not being aware that it's a dream,
yes,
this is a conceptual mind with a wrong consciousness?
Okay, there are dreams that are said to be direct perceivers, non-conceptual. All right, non-conceptual.
How is that possible?
Through, like, if it's really, really super vivid, so it just directly appears without a generic image. I don't know why, how.
Any example?
Like I gave you an example yesterday, a dream where it's super, super vivid. Like an example, it's not like I have an example where I use different words. It's just without a generic image, no generic. Maybe we don't have those dreams. Maybe none of us have those dreams, only meditators have them. Lama Tsongkhapa doesn't specify, he just mentions them. Maybe he was wrong, I don't know. So if he was right, like if that's what he said is right, and I'm pretty sure he was actually, so who has those dreams? Why do they arise? I cannot tell you, because there's not more explanation given. In fact, Tibetans are not big in dreams. They don't think they're important. Let me just finish, please. So, therefore, with regard to this question you had, so there can be direct, that is, non-conceptual dreams. Okay?
Most normal standard dreams.
99.99999% are conceptual, but there are these exceptions.
And are they wrong consciousness?
Well, it depends whether you know that the object doesn't exist, or whether in the case you dream, let's say you have a non-conceptual dream of an elephant. Okay? What appears to your mind? An actual elephant? No, it's a dream elephant. Right? It's a dream elephant. You see yourself walking outside, usually you're part of the dream. So you're not walking anywhere, and what appears to you is a dream elephant. So if in one moment of that dream, there is this is not an elephant, or you perceive dream elephant, just dream elephant, in that moment. Oh, dream elephant. That mind just thinks that directly, without any other perception. Then that would be a correct mind. It's non-conceptual, so it becomes a direct perceiver. If that mind perceives that the dream elephant to be an elephant, if it perceives that appearance to be an actual elephant, then in that moment it's non-conceptual, but it's a wrong consciousness. Now here is highly theoretical. I mean, there's so few dreams that are non-conceptual, I guess, and it's just a matter of understanding this division of conceptual, non-conceptual, whether it's in a dream or whether it's in everyday life, whatever it is. Does that make sense? Does that explain that? Okay, you wanted to say something to that?
No, I was just wondering, how about the deep sleep state when there is no dream? Can that be an example of it?
No, there's just a deep sleep state, and you probably just have darkness appear to the mind, maybe just blackness. Okay.
So being lucid or not, doesn't change.
Yes. Please.
How
Go
does
ahead.
the nature of your mind compare when when you're in meditation, concentration, and when you're in a deep flow state, like in a creative pursuit or in writing or
Flow?
Like in a flow.
Flow state, yeah. It's like
I know.
You get really engrossed in
That's actually
work or something.
Yeah, that's very good. That's a great state of concentration. What about that?
How does that compare to in a meditative state, like on your breath, concentrating on your breath?
Well, it's probably less boring. I mean, come on, let's face it, it's boring to watch your breath, right? It's kind of easier to get in that flow, because usually you do something you like to do. I mean, who likes to watch their breath? I mean, initially at least. So it takes some time to get into that flow. But it's something very positive. I mean, once you're in that flow, the quality of your work becomes better, and it's a type of concentration. Yes. But it's usually something we like to do. Whereas meditation is often seen as an antidote to certain attachments, which then means we don't really like it. We just need to get ourselves doing it until we find some joy in them. I'm really sorry, I can't take all your questions because it's already past lunchtime. Let's start with... So raise your hands again who just raised them recently. Bao, you raised your hand? You did? You did? Oh, you did.
It's actually just adding.
Oh, yeah, okay, just adding to it. So anyway, those were the ones who raised their hand. So you be the first ones again. I try to be fair. I sometimes just forget, so sorry for that. But I'll see you again after lunch. And you also.
No, mine was just a clarification, not a question.
Okay.